In 2025, the world witnessed 20 events so extraordinary, so deeply unsettling, that historians will spend decades asking, were these coincidences, or was something darker orchestrating the collapse of our world? 20 incidents shattered the fragile illusion of stability. Some were acts of terror, others were quiet machinations of power. Some defied easy explanation. If you're ready to witness the story that changed everything, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because what you're about to see will disturb you. This is the story of 20 mysterious events that changed the world. Event 20. New Year's Day. Terror. The very first day of 2025 announced itself not with celebration, but with blood. On January 1st, as revelers packed Bourbon Street, an ISIS-inspired attacker climbed into a Ford F-150 and accelerated directly into the crowd. 15 people died instantly. But consider the symbolism. Why January 1st? Why the most symbolic moment of a new year? Security officials were left with troubling questions. How did a vehicle breach security on the busiest night of the year? What gaps existed in a system supposedly designed to prevent exactly this? 19 minutes elapsed before authorities responded. 19 minutes of terror. Within weeks, the story vanished from headlines. Why such rapid media silence? What were authorities discovering that demanded discretion? The attacks sparked nationwide security concerns, yet the narrative simply disappeared. Event 19. Blood relatives shared evil. Australia's deadliest terrorist incident occurred at a Hanukkah celebration. On December 14th, a father and son team opened fire at Bondi Beach, killing 15 and wounding over 40. A father and a son, bound by blood and extremism. What ideological poison infiltrated a father's mind? What weapon of manipulation corrupted his relationship with his own child, transforming family bonds into instruments of mass murder? This wasn't random. This was deliberate, coordinated, and conducted by blood relatives. Security experts faced a chilling realization. The threat wasn't external. It lived within families. It whispered in private conversations. It festered in spaces parents and children shared. The question nobody dared ask: how many other families harbor this darkness right now, while watching loved ones from across the dinner table? Event 18. Vertical Apocalypse. November brought devastation to Hong Kong, a city of 8 million living in structures stacked impossibly high, where fire becomes apocalypse. A catastrophic blaze consumed one of the world's most densely populated urban centers. The fire revealed something terrifying. Our greatest cities are architectural tinderboxes. We've built monuments to density without building monuments to safety. The infrastructure vulnerabilities that experts claimed didn't exist suddenly became undeniable. Aging systems, overcrowded buildings, insufficient emergency protocols, all exposed in flames. How many other cities are ticking time bombs of population density and deteriorating structure? When the next fire comes, and it will, how many thousands will realize too late that they lived in a trap? Event 17. The First Assassination. On September 10th, Charlie Kirk, an influential right-wing activist and Trump ally, was assassinated at Utah Valley University. An assassination, not a shooting. An assassination, a targeted killing of a political figure. Kirk's death intensified political polarization to unprecedented levels. But more significantly, it answered a question that had haunted democracies. Could political violence in America escalate to the point where prominent political figures were assassinated? The answer, on September 10th, became undeniably yes. Suddenly, every political rally seemed more dangerous. The implicit agreement that political opponents would not resort to assassination had been shattered. The boundary had been crossed, and once crossed, it cannot be uncrossed. Who assassinated Kirk? Everyone had theories. Some blamed left-wing extremists, others blamed right-wing factions. But the real damage wasn't Kirk's death. It was the paranoia that followed, the assumption that political assassination could happen, that nobody was safe. Event 16. The Era of Reckoning. On July 23rd, the International Court of Justice issued a ruling that should have terrified every world leader. Countries can now sue each other over historical emissions and climate damage. The court declared, "The era of climate impunity is over." But this ruling arrived decades too late. The damage was already atmospheric. The carbon was already locked into centuries of warming. This legal weapon could only swing at ghosts of past decisions. Every industrial nation that built wealth on fossil fuels now faced potential lawsuits measuring in trillions. Developing nations victimized by Western industrial excess suddenly possessed legal standing to demand restitution. But who would enforce this? Who possessed the power to make a nuclear-armed superpower pay reparations? If they couldn't enforce it, what good was the ruling except as a monument to our collective failure? Event 15. 300 silenced voices in 2025. Silence became the most dangerous thing in the world. Over 300 journalists had been killed since October 7th, 2023. The year 2025 became the deadliest on record for journalists. Ever. These weren't accidents. Many were assassinations. Some were murders disguised as collateral damage. Others were executions. Journalists killed specifically because they possessed information someone wanted silenced forever. Press freedom, that cornerstone of democracy, was hemorrhaging. With each death, fewer people documented atrocities. Fewer witnesses meant fewer truths. Fewer truths meant power consolidated in shadows. Consider the mathematics of silence. 300 dead journalists equals 300 stories untold, 300 investigations abandoned, 300 whistles that would never blow. The assault on press freedom wasn't just an attack on journalists, it was an attack on reality itself. By year's end, entire regions had become information black holes. What was happening in those dark spaces? We'd never know, because the people who could tell us were already dead. Event 14. Regional Dominance. Throughout 2025, Israel conducted controversial airstrikes across the Middle East with escalating aggression. They targeted Syrian presidential positions. They assassinated Hamas leaders in Doha, inside another sovereign nation. They struck Iranian military commanders in June. Each strike was technically separate, but viewed together they resembled something more sinister. A pattern, a strategy, an expansionist military campaign conducted with apparent impunity. How many airstrikes occurred before international bodies acknowledged them? When did these strikes stop being defensive and become offensive? When did the line blur so completely that nobody could see it anymore? The question echoed through diplomatic channels. Was this the beginning of a regional war that would metastasize across the Middle East? Were these strikes opening moves in a larger game of domination? Nobody wanted to answer, because the answer was probably yes. Event 13. The authoritarian axis forms. On September 3rd, during commemorations of the 85th anniversary of World War II, Putin and Kim Jong-un met in Beijing, two authoritarian leaders standing together. During a remembrance of the last global catastrophe humanity inflicted upon itself. The symbolism wasn't subtle. A visible, undeniable alliance was forming. An axis, a coalition of authoritarian powers united against Western influence. What did they discuss in private? What weapon systems were exchanged? What strategic agreements were formalized? We would never know. But we could see the result. A nuclear-armed alliance forming in the heart of Asia, explicitly unified against the West. And the world's response? Diplomatic protests that changed nothing. Event 12, Undeclared War. Throughout 2025, the U.S. conducted lethal military strikes on civilian boats in Venezuelan waters. The official justification? Drug trafficking interdiction. The actual result? Approximately 100 people dead. But here's where the story becomes truly unsettling. These weren't military engagements. These were civilian vessels, fishing boats, small merchant ships, carrying people, not weapons. People whose only crime was existing in the wrong geographic location. The international community expressed shock. Venezuela protested vehemently, but the strikes continued throughout the year. Lethal, indiscriminate, drawing virtually no international consequences. What message did this send? That American military power respected no borders, that civilian deaths were acceptable casualties, that international law was merely a suggestion. How many victims were actually drug traffickers, and how many were innocent fishermen? Without independent investigations, we would never know. Without transparency, suspicion metastasized into certainty. Event 11. Secrets meet surveillance. The explosive release of the Epstein files simultaneously triggered heightened concerns about AI-powered surveillance and privacy violations. The connection seemed innocent enough. Old secrets exposed, combined with new technology concerns. But think about what this convergence represented. Every digital communication you've ever made, every location visited, every person contacted, all potentially subject to AI analysis, all potentially exposed. The Epstein files revealed that powerful men operated with impunity for decades. They exploited the vulnerable. They destroyed evidence. They silenced victims. And they did it within a system supposedly protecting children. Now imagine predators equipped not just with money and power, but with AI tools analyzing millions of potential victims. Tools identifying patterns of vulnerability. Tools predicting human behavior and exploiting weakness at scale. The Epstein files were the past. AI surveillance was the future. And the question haunting 2025 was whether we'd learned anything or simply found more efficient ways to recreate the darkness. Event 10. The Youth Revolution. On September 8th and 9th, something awakened in Nepal. Thousands of students stormed the government complex, protesting corruption and a social media ban. The government burned. 22 people died. Prime Minister Ali resigned. But the numbers don't capture the spiritual significance. Generation Z had declared, through blood and fire, that they would not accept the status quo. They would not accept corruption as inevitable. They would not accept surveillance and censorship as acceptable costs. This wasn't a peaceful protest suppressed. This was an uprising, a genuine popular revolution conducted by young people fighting for their futures. But here's the haunting question. Was this unique to Nepal? Or was Nepal merely the first domino? How many other young people across the world recognized the same truth, that their governments didn't serve them? That change would only come through confrontation. By year's end, the question wasn't whether Generation Z would challenge power structures. It was when, and where, and how violently. Event 9. Theft in plain sight. In October, audacious thieves executed what seemed impossible, a daylight robbery at the Louvre Museum in Paris. Crown jewels worth 88 million euros. Method, posing as workers. Security implications, catastrophic. The Louvre is the world's most visited museum. Its security is supposedly world-class, designed to protect humanity's greatest treasures. Yet thieves simply walked in, posed as maintenance workers, and stole irreplaceable pieces of history. How did they know the blind spots? How did they time the theft perfectly? How did they move 88 million euros in stolen goods out of a building surrounded by police? Security experts couldn't answer. The heist exposed something terrifying. Even our most protected spaces have vulnerabilities. Even institutions designed to prevent theft could be compromised. Even guards trained to detect anomalies could be deceived. More disturbingly, questions arose about insider involvement. Did museum staff participate? Did security personnel look away? The Louvre heist became a symbol of 2025's larger reality. Nowhere was truly secure. Event 8. Nature's Final Warning. 2025 brought extreme weather of unprecedented severity. Los Angeles wildfires caused $76 to $131 billion in damage. 30 people died, but the psychological damage to millions was immeasurable. Southeast Asian typhoons killed over 200 people. European wildfires devastated forests standing for centuries. Global temperatures ranked in the top 3 warmest years ever recorded. But what made 2025's climate disasters truly mysterious was the sheer concatenation of catastrophes. It wasn't one wildfire. It was a global, simultaneous assault of extreme weather events, each more intense than the last. Scientists debated causation. Was climate change accelerating beyond models? Were we experiencing feedback loops previously theoretical? Were we witnessing the moment when global warming shifted from gradual to catastrophic? The truly haunting realization: these were normal conditions of our new world, not occasionally extreme weather, but weather perpetually extreme, perpetually devastating, perpetually killing. Event 7. Democracy in collapse. France descended into unprecedented political instability. The first divided parliament since the Fifth Republic's founding in 1958, 4 minority governments collapsed. One government lasted only 27 days. 27 days to govern a nation of 67 million people. France, a G7 power, a permanent UN Security Council member, a nuclear nation, had become ungovernable. The implications cascaded across Europe. If France couldn't form stable government, what did that mean for European unity? What did it mean for NATO? What did it mean for the EU's ability to act decisively? But the deeper question was spiritual. France's government had lost consent of the governed. Citizens no longer believed in institutions designed to serve them. Parties fractured into increasingly narrow interests, and the mathematics of democracy, coalition building, compromise, consensus, had become impossible. This was institutional collapse before it became complete. This was the warning sign that sophisticated democracy was failing. Event 6. War without end. Despite Trump's diplomatic efforts, despite a summit with Putin, despite international pressure and countless negotiations, the Russia-Ukraine conflict dragged into its 4th year with no resolution. Russian advances continued at massive human cost. Hundreds died daily. Villages were obliterated. The civilian population endured siege, bombardment, and occupation. And nothing changed. Trump discovered what every leader before him learned. Ukraine and Russia weren't negotiating because they both believed they could win, or feared what losing would mean. For Russia, losing meant admitting a smaller nation defeated them. For Ukraine, losing meant losing sovereignty, territory, the future they'd fought for. So they fought, while the world watched, exhausted, unable to stop something it no longer comprehended. The truly haunting aspect: this was future 21st century warfare, not quick, decisive victories, but endless stalemates where millions lived in permanent trauma, displacement, loss. An entire generation of Ukrainian children growing up knowing only war. By year's end, the question wasn't when the war would end. It was whether it ever could. Event 5. The Intelligence Race. In August, OpenAI released GPT-5. The capabilities were extraordinary. The implications were terrifying. Google countered with Gemini 3. Before dust settled, China's DeepSeek R1 announcement shifted everything. Not because DeepSeek was more advanced, but because China had achieved parity while Western intelligence claimed they were years behind. Trump announced a $500 billion Stargate project with OpenAI and SoftBank. $500 billion. The largest infrastructure investment in American history. Designed to do one thing: win the AI arms race. But what does winning an AI arms race mean? What happens when artificial intelligence exceeds human intelligence? When machines think faster, process more information, and generate solutions beyond human comprehension? AI wasn't like nuclear weapons, which deterred through mutually assured destruction. AI was intellectual dominance. Whichever nation possessed most advanced AI would possess ability to make decisions humanity couldn't understand, at speeds humanity couldn't comprehend. Trump's investment suggested the U.S. government understood. This wasn't about technology. This was about existential dominance, about ensuring whoever controlled artificial general intelligence controlled the future. Event 4. A fragile peace. Nearly 2 years after Hamas's October 7th attack, a ceasefire was finally negotiated under intense U.S. pressure. Nearly 2 years of war. Nearly 2 years where Gaza transformed from a place to a graveyard. The ceasefire was described as fragile, not stable, not durable, but fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. Had the war achieved anything? Hamas still existed. Israel's security remained threatened. Tens of thousands were dead. Gaza was destroyed. The fundamental conflict remained unresolved. The ceasefire wasn't victory for anyone. It was exhaustion. Both sides, recognizing endless war, had drained resources, lives, and international goodwill without bringing either closer to objectives. But the truly haunting aspect: this ceasefire would likely be broken. Another flare-up was inevitable. Fundamental tensions, occupation, resistance, competing claims to territory remained unresolved. The ceasefire was a pause, a breath, a moment of terrible peace in a conflict that had killed hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. By year's end, everyone waited, wondering, when would it collapse? Event 3. The American Shepherd. In May 2025, Cardinal Robert Prevost was elected Pope Leo XIV. He became the first American pope in history. The Vatican's announcement shocked the Catholic Church. An American leading Christendom. At a moment when America experienced unprecedented political volatility, fractured ideology, and internal conflict, the symbolism was profound. Global Christianity now had an American face. Did this represent globalism, or Americanization of the Church itself? Pope Leo XIV inherited an institution in crisis. Clerical abuse scandals destroyed public trust. Progressive reformers demanded change. Conservative traditionalists resisted. The Church hemorrhaged membership, especially among young people. Why an American? Why at a moment when global power structures shifted, when authoritarian alliances formed, when Western institutions seemed weakening? Some wondered if the Church chose an American specifically to reaffirm Western Christian dominance. Others suggested the Church desperately sought legitimacy by choosing someone untainted by Vatican scandals. But the question haunting 2025 was whether any pope could save an institution having lost moral authority among billions, viewing the Church as complicit in suffering rather than redemptive. Event 2. Institutional Breakdown. The reverberations of France's political collapse deepened throughout 2025, demonstrating how quickly democratic institutions could unravel. Le Cornu's government, lasting only 27 days, became symbolic of systemic failure. Voters no longer believed any coalition could address their concerns. Trust in parliamentary democracy itself eroded. Across Europe, similar fracturing occurred. Italy's government weakened. Germany's coalition strained. The European project, built on post-war consensus, was fragmenting. This wasn't coincidence. It was synchronized institutional failure across the developed world. Democracy itself was being questioned not by external enemies, but by its own citizens. Event 1. The order collapses. On January 20th, Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 47th president. His return triggered sweeping policy shifts so radical that observers worldwide struggled to comprehend the magnitude. Within days, he withdrew from the Paris Agreement and WHO. The implications were staggering. America deliberately decoupled from global institutions. Mass deportations followed. Millions separated from families. Communities destabilized. Then came the tariffs, 10% base tariffs on all goods, with country-specific tariffs reaching 50%. He forced the EU into unfavorable agreements and restructured global trade architecture single-handedly. Was Trump deliberately dismantling the post-World War II international order, or pursuing nationalist policies without understanding consequences? By year's end, the world was fundamentally different. America wasn't leading the liberal international order anymore. It was withdrawing. Other powers, China, Russia, India, filled the void. The consensus-based system governing since 1945 was fragmenting. Trump's return was the moment when the American-led world order began its final collapse. 20 events, 20 moments that reshaped our world. When viewed together, they form a narrative of collapse, a system failing, an old order disintegrating. The year 2025 was the moment we realized we were living in a new world, a darker one, a more uncertain one. If this video unsettled you, disturbed you, or made you question reality, comment below and tell me which event disturbed you most. Like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because the story continues in 2026. Stay vigilant.